Hello everyone, how's it going? Dr. Incompetent here, and I'd like to do a review of Alan Wake Remastered, shall we? So, I guess in a lot of ways this is just a review of Alan Wake itself, because the remaster doesn't add too much to the gameplay from the original. It just redoes the engine and makes it much more visually appealing. There are some other small changes, but I'm going to be talking about my experience playing Alan Wake Remaster, which is my experience completing the game. I actually played the original Alan Wake or the PC version of Alan Wake, and then kind of bounced off of it and decided I would give it another shot. And here we are, as I have in my Let's Play, which I'll put a link in the description below. I've completed the game for the first time, and I thought I'd put my thoughts into a review. So, Alan Wake is a, third-person, over-the-shoulder horror game, sort of like Resident Evil in the way that you play your character and you have guns and it's a horror game, or, Silent Hill or something like that, but not like Resident Evil in that Alan is not a good fighter, and it's more about running for your life and unraveling a story as it is to just mowing down wave after wave of enemies and, getting and upgrading weapons or anything like that. This is first and foremost a game about a supernatural thriller story that you explore in the Pacific Northwest, trying to figure out what's going on with novelist Alan Wake as you play. So this is a game that is very story-driven, has a great narrative, terrific voice acting, and it has the gunplay that makes it similar to perhaps a Resident Evil, but as you're going to see when I unfold the review, you can't play it that way, or you're in for, well, a nightmare, wink wink. So on Steam, Alan Wake is defined as action, horror, adventure, third-person thriller by the user-defined tags, and that's right. So let's talk then, once we know what Alan Wake is in terms of what kind of a game it is. What we have to do is discuss a little bit at the beginning of this review some acceptance of what Alan Wake is to try and help you understand if this is a game that you might want to play, and something that really made it difficult for me to get into at first. So in the first portion of this review, I'm going to give my letter grade for Alan Wake Remastered based on a set of criteria, and then in the second portion, I will recommend whether or not you should play Alan Wake. So the acceptance comes from the fact that if maybe this is easier for other people than me, but what I didn't get at first when I played this game was that Alan Wake is awful at fighting anything and being athletic in any way, and he's never going to get better at those things. So you need to just accept that this game puts you in a situation where you're an everyman in a horror nightmare scenario, and you are outmatched at pretty much every turn, and you need to run away more often than you need to fight. So once I finally just embraced that you've got to use your flashlight to hit the enemies, and then you can shoot them. You got to use all of your materials, your consumables. You don't sandbag anything because the game will periodically just take them all away from you anyway. Then I was able to just have more fun with the game because I was playing it like I was playing Resident Evil, and that is a mistake. So Alan Wake is a game where you are in a really unfavorable situation for Alan, and you're just running for your life. But the story is so good, the environment is so good, that I think it is an overall good experience, and it's definitely a story that you want to take part in, learn about, uncover as you play. So the first thing we want to talk about with a game in any review that I do is the fun factor. Is Alan Wake a fun game? And that's tricky because you're actually, there is a spin-off, Alan Wake's Nightmare, and you're pretty much in a nightmare. You're in a really bad spot with Alan, and things keep turning and going worse and worse, and you never feel comfortable in this game, or if you do, it's very fleeting, and you need to be on your toes and just accept the fact that you're going to get knocked around as Alan. Once you can do that, you will enjoy the ride in the sense that it is a great game to explore. I love seeing what's out there. I love seeing how detailed and immersive the world is. And it is exhilarating to survive situations that kill you again and again until you can get through. But mostly what I'm trying to do is just survive so I can learn more of the story, because I want to know what goes on. So it's not a game that's fun in the sense that I'm having the best time ever, because controlling Alan is frustrating. The man can't run. The man can't fight. It's beyond unnerving, but it's like watching a horror film where you're watching people and you're like, run away. The bad guy is right there, and they just can't do it, and that's just how it is. And the fun comes from meeting the characters, learning the story, finding the manuscript pages, figuring out how to survive, and just taking part in this kind of interactive thriller and supernatural story. So the next portion of the review I'd like to discuss is the controls. Like, how does Alan Wake control? So for me, it controls sensibly in the sense that it's a third-person game. You move with the left stick, you can move the camera around, you aim and fire very reasonably, and things work in terms of your gunplay in an intuitive fashion. However, it's not intuitive because you're fighting shadow people for some reason, which they can be hurt by bullets, I guess. And Alan is terrible at shooting anything, and you need to shine your flashlight on them, which mysteriously goes out of batteries when you're trying to shine it on things. I guess you're intensifying the beam with a function that I've never seen before with a flashlight, but boy does it use that battery. Anyway, the controls actually, for me, are one of the detractors of the experience, in the sense that Alan can't sprint very well. There's some dodging mechanics that you can do, and when they work very well, but it's not always the most graceful of games. It shows real problem for me when you try to do any platforming. The game does have you do some running and jumping sometimes. Usually I just die a few times until I figure out how to make Alan actually run and jump. But granted, I'm not great at video games. So if you're amazing at video games, then no problem. Like, this is just going to be, pretty smooth for you. But for me, especially considering this is an older game, a lot of maybe more modern sensibilities of how to control in a game like this are absent. That being said, the controls don't prevent you from playing the game. You just have to embrace what Alan is capable of to take full advantage of the controls. I'm going to do a beginner's guide for Alan Wake because I learned a lot by playing through the game that I think would be helpful if you want to try to get into this, and I'll put those into a series to kind of open things up. But let me just tell you right now, use your flares, use your grenades. The game gives you these things for a reason, and unlike in Resident Evil where you sandbag stuff for a boss, that's not usually what you need to do in this game. You want to use them because you never know when you're going to wake up without everything that you've been collecting and hoarding, and then you feel terrible because you made situations harder than they needed to be because you were sandbagging batteries and, grenades and flare gun rounds, etc. So use what you've got, and then it's a matter of understanding what Alan Wake is asking you to do. It's tricky. It doesn't always tell you this, but it's either basically Alan needs to run or Alan needs to stand and fight. And you have to figure out, is this a time when I'm supposed to kill all the enemies and then, I can progress, or do I need to just run away and try to get to a lamppost or something like that somewhere? And you need to figure those things out. Luckily, the game if you die, you usually start at a checkpoint. It does checkpoints all the time, so you're just kind of replaying stuff as you figure it out. It can be frustrating, but once you realize you're not really losing that much, it's fine. So the controls, for the most part, are okay. They can just feel agonizing at times, but it's by design, which is so crushing. It's like you're supposed to be bad. Alan Wake is supposed to be bad. He even explains at one point that he creates the story to make it that way, to make it so he has to struggle, and that's part of the experience. So, your mileage might vary, but sometimes it's not always the most fun to be somebody who's inept at doing what the game is asking them to do, but if you can embrace it and be in good spirit, then you can survive. Now, a subset of control I like to discuss are the systems and the UI. How do these things work in the game? So, luckily for the systems, there really isn't that much. There's like walking around talking when it's daytime and things are okay, exploring, that's fine. And then there's like, I need to fight and I need to run around. The combat is not my favorite, and it's because it's dual focused. The enemies are shrouded in the darkness, and you need to use your flashlight and intensify the beam until they kind of get the darkness knocked off of them, and then you can shoot them. And until you get this down, you will waste a lot of bullets and not feel very powerful, but it's part of the experience. And it works fine, and that's really all the game asks you to do. The only system that I think is not well executed is any kind of platforming at all, but, that's not too much in the game, so it's not a huge detractor. It's just something to be aware of. Additionally, the UI is good in the game. You can check your journal, you can check your items, you can read your manuscript pages, and everything makes sense. It's pretty minimal in terms of the UI. I wish sometimes there was a little bit more transparency. It would be nice to have maybe a stamina meter for Alan to see when he can sprint and how long he can sprint for, stuff like that. But it's visual. You need to pick up on that visually. They want the game to be more immersive, so they don't really have a lot of those elements that, like on a heads-up display that you would expect. So you have your health bar, but that's pretty much it. So you need to kind of pay attention to, where Alan is at fatigue-wise. And I think overall the systems in the UI are functional and fine in the game. Now, moving on, I want to talk about the story in Alan Wake. What is the story like in this game? And this is why you play the game, for me. The reason I enjoy Alan Wake is because it's got an amazing story. It's really makes you think. It doesn't necessarily answer all of the questions that it presents, but at the same time, it's mysterious and it's cool. And if you like Twin Peaks and Twilight Zone and these kind of like campy sci-fi type stories, then this will completely be up your alley and in your wheelhouse. So the writing is great, the dialogue is great, and the story is why I kept playing the game even when I was getting frustrated and struggling with it. And now I'd like to talk about the visuals of Alan Wake. Like, how does this game look? In Alan Wake Remastered, it looks great. Most of the time, it looks phenomenal. The textures, the animations are very good. There's some jaggies that they just couldn't get rid of, and there's some awkward stuff going on here and there. But overall, I think the game looks fantastic in the remastered version. It's just a thrill to play. Now, I played on PlayStation 5, so that is my take on it, and I think it runs beautifully on the PS5 and looks great. Now, what about the audio in the game? The sound, the effects, the music, and the voice acting. All of these things are great in Alan Wake. The voice acting is tremendous. The music is good. The sound effects are fantastic and scary. Everything is operating on, the basically full cylinder for the audio stuff. So I think the sound is tremendous in the game. Now, how does this all come together in a sense of style? Does Alan Wake feel like it has a sense of style, or does it feel like it's a derivative, kind of, uninspired game with no soul that maybe looks good but doesn't have much beneath the surface? Luckily, Alan Wake is a unique, individual, iconic at this point game with a sequel that I very much look forward to playing, and you also have Control and some other games in this world that are great if you enjoy, the Alan Wake universe. I think that this game oozes style. It has, a cool narration element. You get creative stuff. You get a good story. You have good visuals. Everything looks very well cared for in terms of the environments and the detail. The characters feel real. And it is just a tremendous accomplishment in terms of an artistic expression and a unique and individual game. So given everything that I just said, how would I grade Alan Wake? What would I give it as a letter grade? So before I give my grade for games, I always try to provide a grounding in the Steam reviews and the Metacritic scores so that I can kind of use that as a baseline. Alan Wake's tough because Remastered is not on Steam. I believe it's Epic only. I don't know if it's going to come to Steam, but I can't see it on Steam right now anyway. So I'm looking at the Alan Wake itself scores, and on Steam it's got about 33,000 very positive reviews. And on Metacritic, Alan Wake, the original, is an 83, and the remaster is on PS5 is a 79 from critics and a 7.9 from users. So I'm going to be a little bit kind to Alan Wake because I love story as a literature major, and I think it's just a cool game. If you listen to me playing or watch me playing my Let's Play, you will hear me be frustrated throughout Alan Wake because he's a frustrating guy and his performance in combat is subpar. But if you can get past that, I think this is a tremendous game, so I give it a B+. I think that I can't put it into the A range because I don't like the combat in the game. I don't like the flashlight. I don't like that I never really end up feeling powerful or have any kind of leveling up. I get it. It's all by design. It's intentional. It's not an oversight. It's not a bug. It's intentional. It's just not my favorite. However, the story is awesome. I'm so glad I played it. The world looks amazing. You know, the radio show, the music, the voice acting, the characters, the graphics, and it just all comes together, and it's a beautiful experience. So I still think this is a cool game, which is why I give it a B+. It's just flawed, in my opinion, in certain respects with the game elements. For example, I much more enjoyed the gameplay in Control versus Alan Wake because you feel incredibly powerful in that game. By the end, you're like flying around, throwing desks at people and stuff, and it's awesome. I like the story better in Alan Wake, but I like the experience of playing the game in Control better with my character. I'm excited to see how Alan Wake 2 plays after this and pumped for what that is like because I'm not going to spoil anything about the story, but let's just say I want to know what happens next after I beat it, and I'm excited to find out. So that is my grade for Alan Wake, and I'd love to know what you think of the game and where you would score it, what grade you would give it, what letter grade you would give the game. Now, as far as do I recommend Alan Wake to you? Like, do I think that you should play it? Well, let's talk first about what games are like, you know, in the same genre or space as this. You got to think about kind of thriller horror games like Resident Evil, like Silent Hill, perhaps, and then you're kind of getting into the right space for Alan Wake. And if those are games that you enjoy, then I think this is a game you would have fun with too. You just can't play it like you're going to blow away every enemy because you're not. Sometimes you have to, but it's painful, and it's underscored by the fact that they, for example, most of the time you have a revolver that is, you know, a 6-shooter that you manually reload. So that's brutal, for example. Now, what about the difficulty in Alan Wake? Is there anything that's really challenging about the gameplay that's going to prevent you from enjoying Alan Wake? And I think that it's not too hard. I made it harder than it needs to be by being bad at the game and not just accepting that Alan is bad. But if you can just dive into the fact that you're going to die a few times, Alan's bad, and just use the checkpoints, it's not unbelievably hard on base difficulty to get through. Oh yeah, Max Payne is another good game to kind of compare this to as well. Just in that wheelhouse of like narrative shooter, third-person kind of game with a supernatural flair to it. So it's not overly difficult, but it's not the easiest game in the world either. Now, what about the value of Alan Wake Remastered? Is this a good buy? So I think it's a good value, but I don't think it has tremendous replay unless you want to see the story again or you want to try to collect all of the, coffee canisters and the collectibles and stuff. I think that it's worth it in terms of value because the story is so good and you want to experience it, but I don't know if it holds up on play and play again, and it's not a 100-hour type of game. It's like 15-hour kind of thing. So you have to be aware that it's not a super long game, but that's good. It doesn't overstay its welcome. I think it's a completely fine in that space. Also, if you like Twin Peaks, if you like X-Files, if you like, Twilight Zone and supernatural kind of, detective FBI stuff, then this might be a game that you enjoy too, because it's in that space. Now, what about the replayability? I just kind of mentioned that. I think that maybe after a year or so, I want to replay it just to get the story again and see what I missed. But I'm not thinking that I need to replay this again anytime soon. And as far as do I recommend this game overall? Yeah, I think I recommend Alan Wake Remastered overall if these kinds of games are for you. If you love story-driven games, if you're willing to give it a chance and suffer with Alan in places, I think you would like this game, because even though I had some frustrations, overall, as I reflect on my experience, it was good, and I recommend the game, and I like it, and I would, talk to other people about it. It has that effect where it's like it's a game you want to talk to people about. It's a game that sticks with you. And so as a gamer, I like playing games that just have a memorable and lasting experience in the space of gaming, and I want to go through those games and play them so I know what's going on with the industry and with games overall. All right, everybody, so that's my take on Alan Wake Remastered. I'd love to know what you think of the game. What are your impressions of Alan Wake? Do you like it? Do you recommend it? Do you agree with my review? Please leave your comments below, and I'd love to hear what you all have to say. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. Take care.